be screwed, feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the first part of, What If Ichigo Enters Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Raven 716 on fanfiction.net. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. This was it, you were ready. Hello, new students, you smiled with a radiant smile across your round brown face, opening the door of your classroom, releasing a delightful plume smell of cinnamon, greeting the faces of your students, or should I refer to you all as freshmen? Please come in and take a seat at a workstation. 4 or 5, please. You step to the side, allowing them in, your amber eyes closed. Among the students, a pair of glower orange-brown turned away from you. When the last student found an empty seat at one of the 10 workstations, you closed the door, and zingly walked to the front. Your long orchid color hair flows behind you with each step, its natural waves moving with the minimal air current in the room, staying in a place with the help of your precious old yellow headband. Along the way, your ears picked up on discreet whispers exchanged among the students. You hoped it wasn't your minty airy tunic dress. Sure, it hung a bit off your shoulders and was a tad loose-fitting, but you made sure to add a large brown elastic belt around your waist to divide it. Perhaps that didn't help as it accentuated your womanly form and legs, from the brown ankle boots you wore. Maybe you should have worn the leggings Adam suggested. Oh, you hoped that wasn't it gripping your small crystal spear hanging from your choker. You chose this outfit since it was spring and the new school year. You wanted the students to feel welcomed. Passing a few more students, you hear their mutters and sigh, relieved it was something else. A giggle threatened to escape from you, but you held it down and added it to your smile you gave the students when you reached the front and turned to face them. All new students. All new first-year students. All new faces among the sea of surprised and blushing students. One student tugged against the collar of their shirt. Another giggle pushed to escape, and this time, you let it softly through the silence. A new school year, you have always looked forward to it since your tenure as a teacher the last 7 years since residing in Karakura for 8 years. You could recall nearly every student, their name, and face that passed through your doors. And you hope to do so again this year. Alright, you clasp your hands lightly together, focusing their attention, now that everyone has found a seat. Namaste. Welcome to my class, my name is Miss Bishop. You point yourself and your name on the chalkboard behind you. It is wonderful to meet all of you. Now, before I thoroughly introduce myself, time for attendance. Clearing your throat and heightening its projection, call the first name. As you went through the list, someone among the students looked at you with a vague familiarity. Tataski, what is it? Asked Orihime, noticing her friend's focus on you. Our teacher looks familiar. What do you mean? Tapping a finger rhythmically on the countertop, Tataski took a moment and searched through her memories for any semblance of you that might provide an answer. Your smile. Those eyes of yours. Everything about you rippled waves of familiarity within Tataski. She began to wonder if, as her eyes moved over to them, they felt the same. Before her eyes could reach them, you called her name and clicked. Tatsuki Arisawa, you call and pause, this name. You call it again, lifting your eyes to her, Tatsuki Arisawa. You smiled, quickly set the roll sheet down, and before anyone could blink, you were by her side and embraced her. Gasps fell from the students' mouths. Tatsuki was stunned. My goodness, it is wonderful to see you again, Tatsuki, you glee, tightening your hug. My, how you have grown. By now, you must be an assistant at the dojo. Dojo. Tatsuki, blinking a few times and managing to wiggle from your grasp, looked at you, confused for a moment when it clicked. It was a quick flashing memory, but there was mistaking it. You were that woman who occasionally came to the dojo to pick up Ichigo or drop him off with his mother or father. Who introduced you as Miss Bishop. Tatsuki exclaimed with wide eyes that turned into a genuine smile. I knew you looked familiar, hey. She remembered you, a wash of relief washed over you that permitted through your eyes. Yes, hey to you too, Tatsuki, your tone softens, this is quite a surprise. A welcomed one at that. You look lovely. Tatsuki, keeping her calm, chuckled at your words, although her stiffened position that Urahara noticed. Ah, thanks. Yeah, it's been a while. Hee hee. But I'm glad to see you again too. Indeed. Please come by when you have the time, it would be wonderful to catch up. You lightly pat her shoulder, your smile never leaving. Yeah. Sure. Pleased to hear those words, you leave her and begin walking back to the front when she informs you of another in her class that you stopped mid-stride. Ichigo's in the class too. Your mouth nearly fell open, but you caught it and turned back to Tatsuki, who thumbed over her shoulder to the left to the farthest workstation in the back nearest to the door. Your eyes follow, and there he sat by Chad, a rather tall, dark-skinned, and muscular teen, trying to hunch and level himself away from you. His eyes remained firmly on the countertop, and despite your incredulous stare, his scowl deepened against his clenched jaw. Your heart jumped elated. How long had it been, you thought, remaining fixed on Ichigo, years no doubt. You notice his scowl, and your heart slightly deflated, it was quite a 360 from the smile he originally carried. You could still recall his smile, brimming with kindness and joy. It mirrored hers beyond a doubt, and it also. The students filled the room with anticipative silence, their eyes on you, then shifted to Ichigo, awaiting if you would do the same thing as you did with Tatsuki. Chad even scooted over a bit, just in case. As reactive as you wanted to be and run over to him, embrace him, as it was long overdue, hold yourself back, and smile wistfully. Welcome, Ichigo, you give a light wave and walk back to the front. You pick up the clipboard, clear your throat, and continue calling and checking off attendance. When you came to Ichigo's name, he quickly responded and returned to sinking away. Once you finished with the last word, you set aside those climbing feelings eating away at you and smiled brightly at the students. Alright, now that we have finished, you stand with a relaxed poise, your shoulders straight and back, chin slightly lifted, legs together, and hands clasped gently before you rest on your dress. Let me properly introduce myself. Blush spread across a few faces, and eyes stared with awe. Urahara blinked a few times while straightening her posture. The way you stood with grace, one would think you came from royalty. Your voice wasn't high, nor was it too low. It was elegant velvet, which was the best way Urahara could describe it. And held everyone's attention, almost. Seeing you had the students' attention, you continued, again, I am Miss Bishop. Your Nexus teacher. The students exchanged confused looks between them, you understood and provided an explanation, one you still were trying to understand. Yes, well, the term does sound rather baffling. I came up with it as it seemed fitting. What I mean is I will be your teacher covering a variety of subjects. One is home economics. The room we have, originally used for physical education equipment, was renovated to suit all our subject needs. The confusion still hadn't left the students, you noticed and understood. You also felt that way when you discovered this about a week before school started and received the assignment in the mail. This change came because the previous teachers moved and you were chosen without much explanation. Either way, you'd make it work and adjust to it. It also explained why your original room was moved out of the 4-leveled building to the 1-leveled building near the track and adjacent to the locker rooms a few feet away. The inside was significantly transformed to accommodate the subjects you were teaching, and the 10 workstations doubled as a work area for the other subjects, even with the fitted stoves, lower cabinets, and sink. It was enough to counter space and ample space between them. You had your station in the center for demonstrations. You immediately knew this was remolded way before you got the letter. Because this room didn't have enough outlets for the 10 refrigerators lined up against the wall behind each station, some were added. All in all, the room was constructed and designed well to accommodate built-in storage for supplies for cooking and other materials and a walk-in cooler to store the food. I understand if that sounds confusing. You assure them doing your best to settle their confusion. Please believe me when I, too, experienced this sudden change. However, we shall adjust together with new change together. In the back, Ichigo nearly lifted his eyes to you from your words. You repeated them precisely as she had years ago. You continued. The remaining subjects are as follows: art, science, and history. Music was nearly added in here. However, it diverged to another. You said with some relief quietly. Since I have 4 subjects to teach you, it has been divided throughout the week. Every day for home economics. 3 for art. 2 for science. 1 day for history. Please write this down. They took out their notebooks. You will come here twice out of each day of school. Morning and then afternoon. Before lunch and after. 2 subjects every day. Understood? A few students nodded. Some remained confused. You thought as much and reached behind you to the stack of papers you had and began passing them out. Written on them is what you just explained. Follow this, and I assure you, this will assist you in understanding this interesting time. Now, there is something I want everyone here to understand. You finished passing out the last one to a student and went back to the front. You waited for everyone's attention, your eyes sweeping over the class, locking eyes with a few, conviction resonating from yours. This is not merely a classroom, and you are not merely students. You are my students. Students, I promise and ensure you will prosper here. This is your haven. I solemnly vow to protect you inside and out in this haven until you graduate. Those doors behind you will be open should you ever need anything. I am here for you, all of you. The room fell into a stunned silence for a moment. This reaction isn't what you were expecting. You begin to worry. Did you say the wrong thing? No, you were quite sure. You've said the same thing for years, and with each word, you meant it. While the students registered what you said, you used this time and walked over to your workstation, where a plate covered with a white cloth sat. Humming to yourself, you take it off, revealing a plate of freshly baked cinnamon and chocolate chip cookies. Who would like one? Alright, children, who would like to share their drawing? Mrs. Ito asked her new class of 3rd graders enthusiastically. Not one hand rose among the devoted and focused students. They were immersed in completing their art. Crayons and markers decorated their desk. Some had shakers of glitter. Mrs. Ito was taken aback by the lack of response but proud at the same time. She smiled, and though there were 15 minutes left before the bell rang, she let them be and headed back to her desk. Mrs. Ito. I'm done. A small fair hand shot up, grabbing Mrs. Ito's attention. It was a tiny, willow boy with short blonde shaggy hair, round cyan eyes hidden behind large thick purple rim glasses, and a peachy presentation. It was Adam Bishop in seat 12, with the blue group. I finished. He proudly said, holding up his drawing, can I share? The other students still hadn't finished, and Mrs. Ito didn't want to disrupt them with only 10 minutes left before school ended. So she decided on another decision. Why don't you just share with me, She suggested, walking over. Before she could reach the table, Adam sprung from his seat and rushed to the front, gathering attention from a few classmates. Giddily he spun around facing everyone, holding his drawing up, setting bewildering looks on Mrs. Ito and the others. Clearing her throat, Mrs. Ito gave Adam a nod to proceed. And what is your drawing about? She asked. I see a lot of, dunes. Adam's face lit up, yeah. Sandy dunes. See. He pointed to the squiggly gray lines on his paper, and this is the moon. See. See. He moved his finger upward to the half-drawn circle. A hand rose from a student and pointed at the strange creatures drawn with brown bodies and purple heads. What are those? Adam dropped his eyes to the drawing at the figures. Oh, those are called bony faces. One child shuddered, they're scary. A few other students nodded while some exchanged ashen looks. Adam maintained his smile and continued. Yeah, they are pretty scary looking. He paused and, with his index finger, pushed his glasses back onto the bridge of his nose, but most are nice. At least this one. He pointed to a bundle of green lines constructed into a body and purple head. This one right here is my friend. He's smaller than the other bony heads. But he doesn't mind. His name is Dash. The bell rang, cutting Adam off. The students quickly gathered their things and cleaned up, adding to the rising noise level with the footsteps of other students passing by in the hall. All right, children, carefully put your things away and line up orderly by the door. Mrs. Ito carefully ushered some students while simultaneously assisting some in their cleanup. Adam remained at the front of the class, still holding up his drawing, and watched his classmates begin to line up. He wasn't ready yet and wanted to continue, so he put forward his other drawing with black squiggly and swirl lines mashed together, forming what seemed to be a head with two straight lines coming from the top of the smaller circle. Mrs. Ito, can I talk about this drawing? Adam asked with a cheery promise. I promise it's not scary. Mrs. Ito ushered in the last child. I'm sorry, Adam, school is over. Maybe another time. Now put your stuff away and get your things. Adam's mouth opened to protest but quickly closed as Mrs. Ito began leading the line out. Swiftly Adam put this stuff away and took his bag as though it came to him and his hat. After fitting his hat on, he despondently followed the line. Students from older grades filled the halls. While those younger grades, like Adam's, remained in line and stayed against the side of the river of students. Adam couldn't help to look with wonder at the older students. He even began waving at some. Few gave a wave back and returned to their conversation. The class made it outside where most of the other students were. Some were leaving, waiting for friends to walk home, or some just walked home. A few parents out front were waiting to pick up their kids. Some kids broke from the line to their respective parents. A few met up with siblings and began walking. Adam noticed students from his class give apprehensive looks back at him while muttering as they left. Adam grabbed the brim of his hat, pulled it slightly over his eyes, and dropped them to his feet. Mixtures of cheerful and giggling voices whirlpool around him. He could nearly imagine their smiling faces and linking arms. The further he heard, his heart slowly lowered and felt himself shrink. Then he heard a familiar name among the clamoring voices he hadn't heard for some time. Hurry up, Karen. Adam's heart skipped, and his eyes snapped up to scout for the owner of the familiar voice. He couldn't find them among the sea of students, and even when he tried standing on his tippy toes didn't help. Adam, what are you doing? Mrs. Ito fretted slightly, raising an eyebrow, noticing him before returning inside. Looking. He strained while remaining on his tippy toes. I am okay. The moment those came out, everything happened in one heartbeat. Mrs. Ito shirked, racing to Adam. Adam slipped and toppled forward to the concrete stairs. The last thing heard was the sharp gasps of those around, before a throbbing ache came, and the world went black. Settled in the darkness, Adam wondered for a moment when a faint voice called to him, and a gleam of light flickered in the distance of the darkness. Curious and feeling drawn to it, Adam reached out a hand to draw it toward him when a familiar voice called to him. It kept calling for him and managed to pull him back. Pain filled Adam's head when he woke, yet he wasn't deterred. He released a laugh when he found you over him, his eyes brimming with something exciting against your eyes brimmed with concern and worry. Noticing that, Adam's smile slowly dropped, and his excitement slightly fizzled. Relief swept over you, seeing him up, and well, you brought him into a tight embrace. This allowed him to realize his surroundings. He wasn't at school or the front of it. He found himself in a white hospital bed and a white hospital room with a large window with a decent view overlooking the town. The sun had begun setting, casting a dark sorbet glow over everything. "Thank goodness you are all right," you sigh, squeezing him tighter and bringing his mind back. "Are you all right, though?" you asked, allowing some space between you and him, cupping his face in your hands, your eyes steadily on him, surveying any sign of discomfort. Adam lost his words for a moment from your look. From your look, he saw his reflection and noticed his head wrapped, taking his attention away from your answer to the bandages. He lifted a hand and lightly touched the bandages. He flinched slightly from the touch but quickly smiled light-heartedly, even letting another giggle slip out. Your heart breathed hearing him and took it as his answer. Gently you kissed him on the forehead. "Will you ever tell me why you laugh?" you asked teasingly, taking your hands back and sit beside him on the bed. You barely finished setting up for tomorrow's lesson when you received a transfer call from the office. The office attendant from Karakura Elementary informed you of what happened, and Adam was taken to the hospital. Your heart dropped, and you flew out of your classroom to the hospital. You burst through the doors of Karakura Hospital, nearly startling the nurse at the counter. You shouted your name back at her and who you were, sprinting down the halls before she could ring for you. You located Adam easily. It wasn't strong, it never was. Your heart nearly split when you entered his room. A nurse was there checking his vitals, and before she could say anything, you appeared by Adam's side while hastily following protocol and providing the information she needed. At that moment, the phone rang, and you blocked her out from there, even when she left. Adam remained unconscious. Without reading his chart, you knew through quick observation what it was, and after closing the door, you placed a delicate hand on his head and called his name. Adam contained giggling, shaking his head with a shrug of his shoulders. "I don't know." You chuckle, shaking your head. He leans on you, still looking at his bandages. "What happened?" he asked cluelessly. "Well, you stumbled down the stairs at school," you tell him, softly stroking his hair. "They said you were on your tippy toes looking for something." "I am sorry if I was late," you whisper, "I did not mean for this to happen." His response surprised you. "I don't mean to be mean, but I was looking for someone else." "Someone else? Who?" He shrugged, leaving the bandages alone and now looking around the room. "My cousins." "Cousins?" Your eyes widen, knowing what he meant, and stare at him perplexed. Before you could inquire more, a knock came on the door, followed by a flat, firm voice. "Hello, I'm Dr. Ishida," a tall man, with white hair, neatly framing his face, sharp blue behind thin-rimmed glasses, dressed in a sharp white suit that was befitting to the white lab coat he wore. He held a clipboard in his eyes where his eyes remained as he walked over to you and Adam. He stopped just 6 feet away and took another second on the clipboard. Adam returned to touching his bandages, and the doctor finally lifted his eyes directly at Adam. "Please don't do that, otherwise you'll aggravate it," Dr. Ishida said, and waited for Adam to lower his hand. Adam did and presented a smile while leaning on you. The doctor finally turned to you. "May Bishop, I presume?" "Yes." A few seconds of silence filled the room. Dr. Ishida held up the clipboard to scan it over, glanced at Adam, now leaning on you, then returned to you. Adam sustained a grade 3 concussion upon his front temple, resulting in his loss of conscience and bleeding. There is minor hemorrhaging or was hemorrhaging. He walked to Adam and held up a finger and pulled out a small flashlight from his pocket with his other hand. "Follow the light, please." Dr. Ishida turned it on, and unison moved his finger and the light. Adam's eyes followed for the few seconds that passed before turning them upward to the ceiling. Dr. Ishida stopped and returned the flashlight to his pocket. He pulled up the clipboard and scribbled something down on it. You tensed a bit but remained calm. "Nothing to be alarmed about," Dr. Ishida informed, noticing your intent focus on the clipboard. Just a few notes. What notes? You questioned, tucking Adam closer, keeping your voice level. Notes to add to his file. That's all. The answer wasn't sustainable, and you had felt there was more behind it. You noticed the flash of surprise in Dr. Ishida's eyes when swiftly glanced at Adam upon entering. A grade 3 conscience with light hemorrhaging resulted in unconsciousness for a few hours and CAT scan with around-the-clock monitoring, especially with a child of Adam's age. To find Adam up and well as though nothing happened would or could be deemed a miracle, but someone like Dr. Ishida didn't seem like someone who believed in such things. He finally finished scribbling on the clipboard and returned his gaze to you and Adam. Is he discharged? You carefully asked. Everything seems in order, yes, Dr. Ishida affirmed, tearing off a paper from the clipboard and handing it to you. You take it, keeping your eyes locked with his, mirroring his calm demeanor. Adam threw up his hands, cheering, I can go. Did you hear? I can go. He squeezed your arm, laughing. Yes, you can. You turned to him, smiling. What do you say to the nice doctor? Adam turned to Dr. Ishida and gave a little bow of the head. Thank you. Thank you, doctor. You're welcome. Now you must be more careful. Otherwise, it could lead to a severe injury. All right. Adam nodded, and with that Dr. Ishida left. Once you heard his steps receded, let out a deep cough. Adam turned to you, concerned, and quickly you present a smile and pat on the head. Come on, let us head home. You get up first and help Adam down. A nurse came in with his things a few minutes after, and after thanking her, take Adam by the hand and leave. As you both walk out, Adam asked you something. Can we to the shop? On the way home, please. Another time, all right? I want to get you home to rest. Oh. Are we going to stop by and light the candles? At the empty place? Yes. Oh, goody. Guess what? We drew pictures in class today. Can I show you them when we get home? Of course. It took 2 weeks for your students to comprehend the class schedule. You didn't fault them, it was understandable. The scheduling was tricky, even with the handout you provided on the first day. A few students came in late after lunch for the second subject you taught, expecting the subject for the next day or prior. Often brought the wrong textbook, so they had to leave class and quickly retrieve it from their locker. You continually provided a hall pass, and the bell always rang when the students left. There was never frustration or annoyance reflected anywhere on you. You approached it with longevity and patience, welcoming the students back when they returned and helping them catch up on the lesson, which was just the first 10 minutes of class. After the bumpy start, everything seemed seamless and smooth. Though writing lesson plans for the subjects was a tad layering, you managed, even if impeded over into your long night hours or mornings. It wasn't too much, you've handled more enormous responsibilities without breaking a little sweat. Thank goodness you had your early evening Tai Chi to level yourself. Something Adam would occasionally join with you. The highlight of it all was seeing and having Ichigo as a student. Even if he remained distantly indifferent, though it hurt, you couldn't fault him. After all, it's been quite some time. You wondered, standing dressed in your robe Saturday morning while finishing cooking breakfast and writing these thoughts down in your notebook at the counter, if Ichigo possibly informed his dad. You hadn't received a call from that number. You did receive a few calls from Karakura Hospital from Dr. Ishida regarding Adam and his recent checkup and to schedule another. Adam was fine. He didn't need it. You made sure of it, but to participate, you followed through. Hearing the sizzle and greasy popping of the bacon cooking, you knew it was done. Before attending to it, you sign your name and close the book. You give the cover 3 taps, grab a spatula, turn off the flame, and take out the bacon. Adam. Time for breakfast, you call while setting the table. Your voice carried all the way upstairs, reaching Adam in his room. The boy, still dressed in his turtle pajamas, sat at his desk drawing and coloring while muttering. "You're moving too much. I can't draw you." He sat his purple marker down and, without looking, picked up a dark blue, only to set it down and pick up a black one. "Your hole is black. Not dark blue. It goes right here." "I know. I know." Adam drew a circle and colored it in. "There. All done." He set the marker down and held the drawing to the wall. "Do you like it?" A knock came on his door with your voice behind it, "Adam. Breakfast time." "Okay. Coming." "Sorry I have to go." He smiled at the wall, setting the picture down on his desk, "but I promise I'll be back." "Be careful, okay, so the lady in black doesn't get you." Adam climbed carefully from his chair and hurried down for breakfast. The closer he descended, plumes of savory richness filled the air, layered with floats of noted honeyed sweetness, setting the rumbling of his stomach off. The pattering of his bare feet alerted you of his presence when he entered. You had just finished placing a pitcher of juice down with 2 cups. Adam's eyes fall to the table covered with plated and papered food. Within seconds he climbed into his seat, his chin barely over the table. You thought of retrieving his booster, but he just tucked his knees under himself and added a few extra inches so he could eat. You took this and sat down across from him. "Guess what?" he began, adding a fluffy-shaped taiyaki pancake. "You poured a cup of juice and waited. I didn't see my cousins again yesterday at school. I wanted to look for them, but Mrs. Ito had us learn math. We're starting with adding. I wanted to draw, though." "You did?" Adam nodded, pouring some honey on his pancake. "Yes. But Mrs. Ito said no. I told her it was important, really important." "Why is that?" You help him scoop a spoonful of sweet rice onto his plate. "Careful. One for the shop and the other for my cousins. I've been drawing a lot of pictures. So I can give it to them." Your heart sunk slightly from his words. "Really? Well, I am sure your cousins will be glad when you give them." "I think so too. We haven't seen them in a long time or uncle. I miss Auntie." "I know you do. I do as well. Eventually, we will connect again." "So what were you drawing this morning, HM? I am curious to know." Adam had his mouth full of eggs before swallowing and answering. He gave it thought for a moment. "More bony faces. Whippy doesn't like them, so I drew him this morning. He came last night to sleep, but I think he was hiding from the lady in black. I think he's scared of her, so I said he could stay here because she can't get him." "Oh, so you are protecting him?" you ask, taking a bite of bacon and keeping your interest forward. He nodded with a shrug of his shoulders. "Yes. I told him I could push her back." He demonstrated holding his hands out front with a pushing motion, like, really far. "Just like I pulled Whippy to me." "Oh, did Ember forgive you?" "Who's that?" "You said their name last night downstairs. Did you find outside last night when you came home?" You stop the spoonful of rice from your mouth. Your bottom lip trembles as Adam's wide eyes stare at you innocently. He looked so much like her, you thought for a moment before quickly returning to his question. You hadn't the words to say, stapled more with surprise than anything by his question. You were unsure how to answer. Adam continued eating while waiting for your answer. Unable to get the words out, you give a little smile. "Would you like some new crayons at the shop today? If they have any." Adam's eyes lit up. "Yes. Please. Oh please. And can I get a new pencil pouch? And tape too?" "Of course. Eat up so we can get started today." With those words, Adam hastily ate his breakfast while continuing a different conversation with you. It revolved around drawings. He even included that he made for Dr. Ishta since they both have glasses. After 15 minutes, you both finished. He helped you clean up the table and wipe down the chairs. You let him go to change so you could wash and put the dishes away. He hurried to his room, and when you heard his door shut, you began washing the dishes. Once you finished the last one, set it down on the dish rack, so it can dry and go to change. As you climbed the stairs, you heard Adam talking again loud while rustling around for his clothes. Usually you'd help him, but he enjoyed picking out his outfit on weekends, so you let him. Reaching your room, 2 doors down and adjacent to Adam's. The house was pretty simple, with 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a small backyard, and the usual aspects of a home. Simple and plain. It worked well for Adam and yourself, and that's what mattered. You came across it 8 years ago with help and transformed it into what it is now. The house was nearly centered and evenly distant from most locations. Before entering your room, you paused with your hand on the knob and, for a moment, hung your head from Adam's question and the memories that used to fill this house. Past children's feet are running up and down the halls, with giggles following. Moments like that remind you of moments long ago. Before those feelings could drown you, you shoved them aside and brought yourself back. Lifting your head and sitting straight, open your door and go in, just as Adam opened his door. It didn't take long to change. You switched your robe for a refreshing one-shoulder canary yellow shorts romper with a white belt. You couldn't forget your choker with hanging blue spear and your yellow handband even though you pulled it back into a messy low ponytail. Quickly you brush your teeth and wash your face. 1 second after you finish, Adam knocks on your door. "I'm ready." You could hear the eagerness in his voice. You opened your door, finding him standing there in purple pants, a t-shirt with a turtle wearing sunglasses, and his school backpack, no doubt filled with his drawings, extra paper, and markers. Most importantly, he had on a huge smile with his hand held out. You took it, and the 2 of you walked downstairs, stopped to get your brown boots, and out of the house. You had a few things to get today and a few stops to make. It wasn't much since you didn't need to bring Adam's wagon, but he wanted to bring it anyway, so he could sit in it and draw. You didn't mind and pulled him and it down the street. The day was clear and bright, a few clouds painted the sky above, and the sun warmed the air perfectly. A couple of trees bloomed with flowers and some brushes as well. The air was filled with their perfume scent. You were almost tempted to pluck one for yourself but resisted. Adam was busy drawing away on some paper. You began thinking of what the lesson for next week with the students would be. You reached the first stop. It was the shop, it was the market. The market was bustling as usual, with vendors about. You thought for a moment that maybe you should inquire about having a field trip here with the students. It would be beneficial for them. As you cruised through deciding and scoping out what you needed and wanted, take a moment and remember when you first came here. Adam was about 4 months old and, just like you, new to this place. You had him wrapped and bundled. You weren't alone. No, you were with them. She was with you and showed you everything with positive light and wonder. Nearly pulling you everywhere to ensure you enjoyed yourself. Honestly, it was odd but not unfamiliar, you just hadn't experienced that for a while. Her family made it better, and you came to enjoy it. A few times, you stopped at vendors, and as you did so, Adam occasionally looked up from his drawing and around. Among the people, he was sure he spotted some lady dressed in black before she leapt away in a flash. There was a cold chill she left behind, he felt. He saw her once more and, in the distance, heard a painful screech. You pulled the wagon closer when a screech came. Adam turned to you with his eyebrows high, yet you remained fine talking to another vendor before purchasing a small bag of tomatoes and daikon. Alright, on to the next stop, you inform him walking out of the market and tossing him a smile back. Then after, we can head to the shop. The next stop was the pavilion. There was an important shop there where you needed to get some trinkets and candles. It didn't take long, and you were done within 10 minutes with a small bag of items that would last about 2 weeks. That's all you needed, and the last stop was the shop. It was nearing late morning when you arrived. Adam always knew when the shop was approaching because he stopped drawing and sat up with his hands up to the sky and a massive smile from ear to ear as though he was going on a roller coaster. The shop wasn't on any main street, it was sort of hidden in the back, off the streets. One had to go down an alley to reach it and a few turns. The place as you approached could be described as an unassuming and old front. A typical Japanese storefront one would possibly find maybe 50 years ago. It had a character with its look. Maybe you shouldn't have worn your boots, but you didn't mind. Before you could come to a complete stop, Adam jumped out and rushed right into the open door. You heard a familiar bratty and annoyed voice shouting at Adam, followed by a meeker and gentle one. You laugh softly to yourself and park the wagon near the shop when a sudden shiver runs down your spine. For a moment, your eyes darkened, and whipped your head around. Instinctively your hand flew to your crystal spear, gripping it. You sharply scoop the surroundings, cement your stance, and feel a charging rush through your BLD to your other hand that begins heating up with a tingling at the tips of your fingers. "Ah, Miss Bishop, there you are," came familiar jovial, appealing voice, snapping you out of your state. Adam came running in, and since I didn't see you, I wondered is something wrong? Quickly you collect yourself, put on your cheerful smile, and glance back to greet them with a way. "Mr. Urahara, hello." The humble shopkeeper with his signature dark green and white bucket atop his messy light blonde hair matched the bits of stubs on his chin. That obscured his gray eyes was a tall, light-skinned man with a lean build hidden beneath his loose-fitting crossed green jacket and matching pants. You noticed he wasn't wearing his black haori, which he usually had hanging over his shoulders. He presented you with a welcoming smile but concernment in his eyes as he walked over and stood behind you, casting his eyes upward. "Did you see something?" he asked casually. You stiffened for a moment. "Oh, nothing, really. Just a bird." "A bird? What kind of bird?" You fell silent as the heat rushed to your ears. Quickly your mind shuffled through the avian information you had and politely blurted out the first one, "A dove." "A dove? Really? Well, isn't that lovely?" Noticing the pun in his response, you quietly and discreetly laugh. "Yes, lovely indeed. Good morning, Mr. Urahara." You turn around, finally facing him. He returned your greeting with a pleasant smile. "Good morning, Miss Bishop. This is quite a surprise seeing you and Adam twice in 1 week, what a treat." "I suppose it is it not? I promised Adam we would stop by today after our outing, so he could get new art supplies. A fair trade indeed. I dash." Before he finished, Ururu, a willowy and quiet girl with long black hair, parted into 2 pigtails with 2 strands of her bangs over her round purple eyes. That was filled with urgency when she looked at you. "Miss Bishop, She muttered softly with some volume, shifting her attention between you and Kisuke, pulling on her knee-length pink and white dotted skirt. Jinta took dash. A loud crash came from inside the shop, followed by a loud yell and a thick crack. You rushed in, followed by Kisuke and Ururu. Your heart was nearly about to yell when you found Jinta, a small boy with red hair and an angry face holding his head, trying to hold back the tears peeping out the corner of his eyes that he pointed glaringly at a tall lightly tanned muscular man, you recognized from his large handlebar mustache, sideburns, and rectangular-shaped glasses and blue apron. Tessai Tsukabashi was one of the few people you knew who could wear cornrows well. He stood domineering over Jinta and between him and Adam, who sat normally where Kisuke does on the platform cleaning his glasses before putting them on. You hurry over to Adam, calling his name, "Adam." Tessai and Jinta turn to you and watch you quickly kneel before him and survey him intently. He doesn't respond until he puts on his glasses and smiles. Jinta's in trouble with Mr. Tessai. You sigh, relieved. Adam is all right. Is he now? You respond calmly, smoothing out his hair. Why is that? Adam shrugged his shoulders and began swngng his legs while looking aimlessly around. I don't know. Actually, he took my glasses, because I wanted to show him my drawings. He threw my backpack over there. He pointed near the door and turned to Jinta. Right? You held back, wanting to shoot Jinta a sharp glare, but he felt, and the boy nearly turned blue. Tessai stepped in, went to his knees, and gave a deep bow. You weren't sure how, but he somehow had Jinta doing the same with a heavy hand on the boy's head. Miss Bishop, my sincerest apologizes. Tessai admitted, Jinta's actions were highly unwarranted against Adam. I should have been present, so this diabolical wouldn't have happened. Jinta fully knows his actions were cruel and wrong. If anything, Jinta will have the appropriate punishment. You saw Jinta tremble out of the corner of your eyes. Leaving Adam, you go over to the boy and set a light touch on his back. He flinched and yelped. I'm sorry. I know. Mr. Tsukabashi, please, there is no need, you assure Tessai as you remove his hand from Jinta and help the boy up. You were even dusting him off and straightening his clothes. Please, do not do it again. All right? Jinta shifted his eyes to his feet briefly before lifting them to yours and found them calmly waiting for his reply. All Jinta could only stare, unaware of the pink creeping across his cheeks. Why yes, Miss Bishop, he finally shoved out and turned to Adam. Sorry, Adam. I'll go get your backpack. Without looking at you again, he hurried to the backpack that was being held by Kisuke and returned it to Adam. Adam's face beamed. Taking his backpack back, he squeezed it with all his might. Thank you. Oh, he remembered, unzipping his bag and taking out some papers, I made everyone drawings. The remainder of your time in Urahara's shop went well. Adam remained in Kisuke's spot, explaining everyone's drawing to them, while you looked and shopped around with Yururu, who held your small basket. You took your time until Adam finished, not once did he stop talking or his smile falter. You just kept thinking every time you glanced at him how much he looked like her, your heart swelled and crumbled each time the thought passed. Miss Bishop, are you all right? Yururu asked, noticing the stinging hidden in your eyes. Quickly you blinked, and it was gone, yes. Just something in the wind. She stared at you uncertainly, you pushed your smile and took her hands in yours. Thank you for your help. As expected, she smiled gratefully and nodded. You're welcome. I like shopping with you. You always smell like flowers. Pretty flowers. I'll take these up front. She hurried over to Kisuke. You called Adam to go and walked over, ready to pay. Only to find out you didn't have to. Excuse, you looked puzzled at Kisuke. He held up one of Adam's drawings, such artwork like this is beyond any form of currency. Are you sure? I can. Kisuke shook his head and set Adam's drawing aside. Tessai had completed bagging the items and handed them to you. Here you go, Miss Bishop. You take them. Still shocked by this gesture, you wanted to pay, but it was clear Kisuke wouldn't be persuaded. So you accepted it under one condition. Though I appreciate your kindness, Mr. Urahara, I will take it if I may exchange it for the kindness of my own, you present, earning a raised brow from him, allow me to make you a meal. I can make it home and bring here or make it here. Which would you prefer? Tessai, Yururu, and Jinta didn't hide their shocked faces. Kisuke managed a bit better through an amused chuckle. He took out his fan, hiding the lower half of his face. A free meal, how could I say no? Sure. Wonderful. Catered or prepared? Prepared, please, Yururu answered, turning everyone's attention to her. She kept her eyes level with the floor. You understood and agreed. Taking Adam by the hand and your items in the other, thank everyone and bid them bye. They watch you and Adam leave, and once your footsteps receded, silence was gone. Tessai held up the drawing Adam gave him. Quite descriptive. He said, handing showing Kisuke, down to the finest detail. Kisuke examined the drawing, indeed. He's getting better. His eyes lowered to a specific part of the drawing, an image he knew all too well. Seems young Adam is indeed a talented artist. By the time you and Adam made it back, it nearing late afternoon, a good time. You still had to write the lesson for the rest of the week, and Adam had homework. When you returned, Adam climbed out of the wagon and went straight to the door. He waited for you to come up the pathway and unlock it. Both of you slipped off your shoes and placed them into the closet with the wagon, which you folded and tucked away after taking out your items. Adam carried one bag while you handled the rest. Setting the things on the table, you and Adam put them away as he told you all about today, the lady in black clothing and what he talked to everyone at Urahara's shop about. Once everything was put away, he did his usual thing, he asked for a small bowl and filled it with milk. He went and placed it outside in the backyard by the fence and came back in. You weren't sure why he did it, all he ever said was it was licorice. I'm going to go draw, he informs you, taking the fork and small plate filled with a slice of matcha Swiss roll and a cup of sweet iced cherry blossom tea, and hurried to his room. Do your homework too, you call after him. You heard his door shut and, taking the bag from the pavilion, took out a simple white candle inlaid with golden kanji and sat on the window sill. Carefully you ensure no one was around and Adam was upstairs. Sensing no one or anything, focus on the candle, hold the small spear on your chakra, and mutter, causing a grayish flame light on the wick. It quickly turned to a normal orange-red. Waiting a few seconds after it was lit, with your hand still holding the spear, snap your fingers, and on the table suddenly appears your teaching materials. Lesson booklet, curriculum, recipes, history books, art books, and some science. As well as a pen. Taking your slice of match roll and a cup of iced tea, sit comfortably, open the lesson booklet, and write down next week's lesson. Good morning, Miss Bishop. You were greeted brightly by your student Urahara Inoue, a cheerful and sweet-natured teen with long orange hair and expressively soft round brown eyes when you opened the door to welcome your class. Her greetings seemingly startled you even now, but you accept them with returned gratitude. You look lovely today, she added. Your eyes drop quickly to your outfit. It wasn't much, just a dark, twisted high-waisted skirt with a thigh split and white sleeveless collared top, with sandals and your yellow hair band and choker with the hanging spear. Good morning, Miss Urahara. Thank you. You reply, stepping aside to allow the students in and greeting everyone. Ichigo again ignored it. You maintained your smile and closed the door once the last student sat. Okay, you begin heading to the front of the class to your workstation. All eyes followed you. Good morning, my precious students. I hope you have finished your given assignment. I want to collect them before you leave. Now then, for today, we begin our first cooking assignment. Before we begin, however, a pop quiz. The eagerness in a few students' eyes faded and was replaced with groans and nerves. You fought off the rising smirk and stood before them with regal tenderness. Complaints and displeasure are understandable. But, it does not dictate this class. If you wisely adhere to the assignment, then the quiz shall be effortless. If not, then you shall refrain from today's lesson. A few heads slumped and some had color draining from their faces, indicating precisely what you anticipated. Nevertheless, you picked up the pile of quizzes and began distributing them when a hand went up. It was Mizurio Kamjima, a youthful-looking teen with black hair and calm blue eyes. Yes, Mr. Mizurio. You acknowledge, handing out the first quiz. Miss Bishop, I don't mind passing the quizzes out for you. He smiled standing from his seat, so you can collect our assignments and use the time to grade them. If you don't mind. You hadn't thought of that, it would shear off time and allow everyone who passed it with today's lesson. How kind of you, Mr. Mizurio, but it is all right, you decline and hand another student a quiz. Mizurio, for a moment, was shocked but didn't let it deter him. Please, Miss Bishop, I don't mind. He added another layer of politeness to his smile. It wasn't forceful or begging. Smiling to yourself, you agreed and tasked him with passing out the quizzes. For the student to pick up the assignments, a few hands flew up, and automatically your eyes went to Ichigo, who kept his hands folded and his eyes on the wall. I'll do it, Miss Bishop. Urahara stretched her hand up high. She nearly lifted herself out of her seat. You turned to her, very well, Miss Orihime. Everyone, please take out your assignment so Miss Orihime may come and collect them. The sound of rustling papers and shifting stool legs filled the room. Within 5 minutes, the quizzes were passed out, and Orihime returned with the assignments and handed them to you. Thank you, Miss Orihime, you give her a gracious smile. From her seat, Tatsaki looked up from her quiz and noticed the transfixed gleam in Orihime's eyes on you. Tatsaki smiled, shaking her head, stopping when Orihime returned to her seat. Tatsaki felt Orihime started gaining some adoration towards you. She had begun questioning Tatsaki about you since the first day of class and burst with giddiness when they approached the class. She tugged Tatsaki to reach the room. Orihime was the first in front of the door, and her eyes never left you when you spoke. There was this magnetism that Tatsaki noticed Orihime had with you. She wasn't sure if you noticed or not. She couldn't blame Orihime. Tatsaki felt that way about you when she first saw you as a child and couldn't believe Ichigo told her about you. This sort of emission of elegant radiance from you was captivating. Tatsaki liked it to the moon. A full moon. Appealing. Light. Enchanting. Yet, there was this distance she couldn't put her finger on. A full moon to Ichigo's mother-son, Tatsaki would think when she saw you with Masaki. Does everyone have their quiz? You ask, gaining Tatsaki's attention back. You were standing before everyone sweeping your eyes over them, ensuring they had the quiz. The students nodded their heads, and you continued, wonderful. You have 15 minutes to complete it. After, we will go over the answer together. Please do not cheat, now begin. The sound of lead scraping and scratching on paper filled the room. You took this time and sat at your desk with the assignments and began grading. Over at Karakura Elementary, it was recess for 1st through 3rd grade. Children filled the playground playing among themselves. Adam, however, was sat in the grass under a tree staring up at the branches of the tree. His eyes seemed to be moving from one branch to another. His mouth speaking soundless words, happily content. Others nearby stopped and stared rather confused at what he was doing. Adam hadn't noticed and continued his single conversation until he got up and hurried inside, now looking to the side and talking to the ground. None of the attendants noticed his absence when he snuck back in. The halls were empty except for some backpacks that hung on hooks outside their classrooms. None of them were his interest, so he walked right by and continued through the halls until he reached his classroom. Mrs. Ito wasn't there, leaving the room empty. Adam walked right in and went straight to his desk. He lifted the top and took out 2 drawings. A smile of beaming pride overwhelmed his face. My cousins are going to love these. What do you think, Whippy? He turned to the side and angled the drawings downward. His smile slightly fell. That's a mean thing to say. I can't give them a drawing of you, they won't know who you are. Don't worry though, I'll make sure to introduce you to them. I'm sure they'll like you. Come on, we better hurry. He hurried out and returned to the empty hall, and stood there unsure where to go next. Which way again? He asked looking down to his right. Oh. Yeah. This way. Holding his drawings close, Adam went left in the direction of the upper grade classrooms on the other side of the school. Running wasn't permitted in the halls, as Mrs. Ito would say, walking feet. Adam tried to slow his hasty feet but they didn't and he kept running. When he reached the flight of stairs to the 2nd floor, he panted tirelessly. A bit of sweat dotted his brow and trickled down, wetting the rest of his face. His glasses nearly slipped off. Using an index finger he pushed them back onto the bridge of his nose. There's a lot, he shrunk slightly, gazing at the mountain of stairs, but my cousins are up there, so let's go. With a shrug, Adam held onto the railing and began climbing, and with his free hand open and pointed towards his feet he added a bit of a push to ease and alleviate some of the pulsating dullness forming in his feet. The bell rang when he reached the top, which meant the other kids were cleaning and lining up. He ignored it and continued down the hall. Casting his eyes up at room numbers on the door he searched for a particular one. Whippy said it had the letter D and the number 4. Right now he was on the B's. Knowing his alphabet, Adam passed the rooms until he reached the C's and slowed his pace, only to come to a complete stop from a familiar voice calling to him in a whisper form. Adam glanced around, finding no one or anything except an empty hall. "Adam," the voice echoed down the hall, "Adam, come here. Come here." Adam remained in his spot. There was no sense of fear that crept over him. A look of curiosity and a smile formed on his face, and his feet began walking toward the perceived direction of the voice, when the bell rang and snapped him back. The doors to the other classrooms opened and the older students began coming out. They didn't notice Adam and he became swept up in the sea of students. Protectively he clung to his drawings when a student accidentally bumped into him and knocked him to the floor. He hit the floor roughly. The force was enough to knock his glasses off. Remaining calm, Adam stuffed the drawings between his teeth and began feeling around for his glasses. A few times his little fingers were stepped on, but he shook it off and kept going. "Do you see them, Whippy?" he asked among the clamoring students. "Where?" He stopped and turned his sight towards the left. He squinted to see and could barely make out something purple just a few feet away near the walls. "There they are. Thanks, Whippy." Reaching out a hand, Adam aimed it toward the object. A pair of heavy feet hastily walked toward them. From the vibrations collected by his other hand, Adam thrusts and clenched his hand. A sudden force of wind, his body along with a few others were suddenly pushed back to the other side. Students became frightened and confused, even more so when they found a large crack splintered along the wall trailing upward. Teachers came out and stared at this new damage. Adam sat up from his spot and rubbed the back of his head, ignoring the splitting pain beginning to erupt from injury. What was that? A student shuffled among the others, which was followed by others. It just happened. Did a vent break? Adam tuned out their concerns, and as he did his best to keep himself steady in the hall that began tilting and teetering, he felt something firm and solid in his hand. Managing to lower his gaze, he found his glasses safely in his hand. He got ready to smile when something thick, warm, and liquid-like, that tasted like a penny, dropped onto his hand a few times. He tried to make out what it was, only that it was red and now painted a part of his hand that color. A scream released from somewhere in the hall. Adam wasn't sure where. It sounded muffled with a deafening ring. He tried moving, and like a sack of potatoes, he dropped and took the world with him back into the darkness. The last thing he heard. Yuzu. And his thought, cousins. The finest silks dressed you as a sterling diadem made of purest metal with a jeweled 9-pointed star in the center, crowed upon your head, replacing your old yellow headband. Bangles and bracelets decorated your wrists and arms, asserting your prominence. You kept a face of poise and grace as you stood before the heavy, long ivory doors engraved with the same star as your jewel. Your ears heard the muffled cheers of adoration waiting to swallow you the moment you appeared. The music began, trumpets blaring and drums beating, shakers shaking, all of it. Your heart pounded against your chest as always, filling your ears with the rushing sound of your BLD in hitched breaths. That was always your cue. The doors began opening, a rush light flooded the long halls, and an infant's cry and a woman's voice suddenly echoed through the halls. Your eyes snapped open with a hitched gasp managed to swallow before it reached Adam's ears and woke him. Feeling the rapid pulsating of your heart begin, you laid a gentle hand over it and took a few moments of the night's silence to regain control. You counted down from 10 4 times, and each time, you struggled slightly. Once you finished, you quietly lifted your head off the side of Adam's bed and, through the darkness, found him sleeping soundly under his blankets tucked safely away. There was no bleeding from his nose anymore or any bruises or scrapes, even though his hand was wrapped. You kept it on, though he didn't need it, and you took care of that for the medical staff at Karakura Hospital to lessen any suspicion. Once again, you received the call. It was during lunch. A few minutes after you released the students, though some would stay back or remain near to eat their lunch, you had to cancel. Again you flew straight to the hospital and rushed right by the receptionist. Within seconds, you located Adam. This time he was up, and Dr. Ishida was with him. The moment your eyes fell on the doctor, his narrow eyes speared you momentarily. You returned with a swift hardening glare and went over to Adam. He had an four attached this time with an oxygen mask. When you called his name, he lit up and greeted you, ignoring his bandaged injuries, and jolly welcomed you with his arms out. You should never have ever made that choice to allow the students to help. None of this might have happened. Though you were glad to see him well, you had caught a glimpse of the distance look tinted in his eyes. Your heart dropped, feeling everything the moment you placed a hand warmly on his back. Adam smiled and began chatting away, even turning to Dr. Ishida several times to verify his story. After 10 minutes of Adam talking, his medication took effect, and soon slumber took him. Once the room fell quiet except for the beeping of the medical equipment, Dr. Ishida informed you of Adam's injuries and the report. Tentatively you listened to Dr. Ishida's mannerisms and choice of words, not just to the information. When he finished and asked if you had any questions, you responded with a firm no. The whole time neither of you broke eye contact. The rest, you thanked him and asked him to leave. He did, and after 45 minutes, you packed up Adam's things, carried him out, and took him home. You stayed in his room for the remainder of the day until you woke and found yourself halfway on his bed asleep. He woke twice before falling back asleep. Adam's little chst rose and fell carelessly. Slowly, you reached out a hand and set it with a feather touch. You could feel his heartbeat and feel each breath. Each one was healthy. There was no ailment you could sense or feel. Slowly you rise to your feet while taking your hand back and lean over Adam, planting a light embrace on his head. Now awake, you slip out of his room, careful not to wake him, and after a long glance at him and a quick one around his room, his walls decorated with his drawings, exit. The halls held a slight chill, but you didn't mind and made your way down to the kitchen, where you filled a pot with water for tea. As the water heated, you took down a cup and found a tea bag. It wasn't the one you wanted, but you took it. The candle's flame was still holding, meaning Adam was safe there. You just wished the same was said when he was at school. The pot whistled, turning your attention back. You pour the water in and let the bag steep before taking the cup and walking toward the table. As you pull out a chair, you stop, struck in your heart with a tightened pain. Your other hand flew over the pained area and clenched it. You knew where this was from and who it was for if you had sat down. Your nails dig into your flesh, and your eyes remain lowered to the floor. You couldn't bring them up to look across. But you could hear the voice as clear as the sun. Sit down, May. Relax. Everything's okay. Masaki's words were clear as day, even after the years that passed. If only those words were so easy. You could still hear them and see her. Sitting there while hearing the cheering laughter of the children upstairs with their father. You could hear Adam's peachy babble laughter fill the house from something humorous. It eased you every time, and you always remained seated with them unless one of the children came down and asked for something or told you something. That someone was always the eldest of the children, the only one with orange hair and brown eyes. Ichigo. You didn't go further on that memory and pushed the chair back in. You hadn't the right to think of a time such as that, so you decided to head to the backyard. The moon hung high overhead in the sky. It was half-shaped. The silent night and cool air greeted you like an old friend, your bare feet welcomed the ground's chill and all of life beneath. How poetic, you thought, taking a sip of your tea. It would be full within the next few weeks, which always meant something new. Some change. You took another sip and moved your gaze from the moon to the sky behind it. There were few stars scattered about, none near the moon. Your eyes remained fixated on the emptiness around the moon, and from it, rising echoing sounds of the procession came. Banners hung high from poles, cheers, lanyards, and banners connected across rooftops. Cheers like crashing waves came with the lively tribunal and jolly music. Smiles on thousands if not millions of faces, hands thrown up, releasing confetti petals. Other hands reach out for a simple touch. Another sip from your tea and the sound of a soft thud from what seemed landed on your roof turned your eyes behind you and upward. Your hand slipped up to your bare neck, you nearly froze but remained calm, and just as you raised another hand, a rustling sound came from behind. You WHP around and steadily walk toward it. No one to anyone should be here at this time. With your free hand, a slight spark flickers from the tips, and your mind shuffles to the right words. The rustling continued as you crept toward it with your hand raised and ready to strike, only to discover something black drinking from the milk-filled bowl Adam left out. It was a stray, sighing to yourself. You turn and walk back. You stop momentarily and turn your eyes upward once again, dwelling on the moon. Your eyes narrowed with a painful softness, and your chin began trembling, matching the clutching despondent in your heart. It grew as you lifted a hand and clenched nothing but the air that slipped through your fingers. "May, what are you doing?" You heard your sister's voice whisper cheekily while stifling a chuckle. Your hand returned to your side. The stray finished the milk and turned its golden eyes upon you before it left. You paid little attention, having turned around and gone back inside. You finished the last bit of your tea and placed the cup in the sink, reminding yourself to wash it in the morning. Taking a deep breath, you let your head drop slightly from the heavy amalgamation of thoughts laboring your mind. From memories to now, and most prominent, what do regarding Adam? Dr. Ishida's glare remained branded in your mind. You wished to know what he wrote on that clipboard. You had to do something about this. Adam wasn't in any condition to return to school, not now, at least. Not to mention you needed to change some things up regarding that as well. That could take a toll, but it was the logical choice you promised her. Adam would have a haven. You wondered how Mr. Splinter would have approached this way. A part of you wished you could ask him or Ember. Straightening yourself upright, quickly relinquish these feelings and flicker your eyes to the landline phone mounted on the wall before moving your eyes to the candle's flame and reach for it. The sound of a strong muffled cough woke Adam slightly from his sleep. Rubbing his eyes, his sight hazily searched through the darkness for the owner. He heard it again. The cough was more profound this time. His eyes landed on the dark outline figure of you with your back against his bed, sitting on his floor, asleep. Another cough came from you, yawning. Adam came under his covers and climbed off his bed, taking his comforter. He reached your side and snuggled up close, and with a tiny gesture of his hand, the comforter lifted and covered you. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 2. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Raven 716 on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.